This is the OBSBot Tail Air. And OBSBot sponsored this video, so I can tell you about it. Now, as you saw from that intro, it has obviously a built-in gimbal and AI tracking sort of stuff. And for the thing that I've used this the most for, that came in very handy. Although that's probably not what this is for, and I'll talk about that in a minute. What it is generally for is live streaming and maybe event coverage, where you maybe put a few of these up during an event or during a live stream, and you can switch between them and control them remotely and all that sort of stuff. But what I've used it for mostly is actually as a behind the scenes camera. And I'm going to talk a lot about how all of its features came in handy when using it for behind the scenes. Now, to get the specs out of the way, it has a 1/1.8 inch sensor, a 23mm f1.8 lens. Its prime lens doesn't zoom or anything like that. That's for the Tail 2, the bigger, beefier, much better version of this. And it can shoot 1080p up to 60 frames per second and 4K up to 30. I've been shooting most stuff in either 1080p or 4K 25 frames per second because I shoot pretty much everything in 25 FPS anyway. Both this camera and this camera are shooting in 25p right now. It has a 2-axis gimbal, so it can tilt and pan. It can't zoom optically, and it can't roll. It can zoom digitally, so it has that sort of function built in. If you want to either zoom manually or have it set to track at a certain frame size, like a close-up or a medium shot or something like that, you can set that and it will zoom digitally with that. But it is digital zoom. It won't be zooming like an actual zoom lens. And there's also 3 settings with bitrate, which makes it easier to sort of adjust your file sizes. If you really want to save space, then you can just shoot in a lower bitrate. It's gonna look not quite as good. Or if you want the highest quality possible, you shoot in the highest bitrate. Okay, now let's talk about the subject tracking. As you can see on here, it's actually tracking me right now. I've set it to track my face, and all the controls for the tracking and everything else is on the app here. And I'll talk about the app and the desktop app in a second. But the subject tracking comes in really handy when you can't be physically operating this. If you want to just put it in a corner and track a particular subject or just whoever happens to be in frame, then it can do that automatically without you having to worry about it. And that's something that I used it for on a recent short film that I was on. I had this sort of as a second behind the scenes camera where I had somebody shooting behind the scenes with my Sony FX30, and I also just gave them this. They downloaded the app on their phone and just sort of like set it up and did what they felt. And it was really handy just having sort of a second angle of everything that was going on. It could track me, or it could track one of the actors or the director or whoever was sort of around. And that just sort of adds another layer to just having a wide angle in the corner, because it can obviously do that. But then with the built-in tracking feature, you can also then either zoom into a particular subject and track them, or just sort of put it in the middle of the room and it can track around rather than being stuck in the corner. And when it comes to the subject tracking, I found it can be pretty decent. It obviously can lose you sometimes if you go out of frame, and then it'll try to grab onto something else. But if there is a clear subject in the frame, it seems to be pretty good at holding on to that and tracking that one subject. And it seems to be able to track a body reasonably well as a face. So even if it can't see the face of a person, if you're looking from behind, it can still see that it's a person and it'll track that. And if you didn't want to use the tracking feature, what you could do is take manual control of it, where I can now just pan this across wherever I want. I can look around the room and we can go all the way around. And for some reason, if it loses that tracking, one, you can control it on the app here and I can tilt it back up or pan it across or whatever, or I could just manually turn it. I want to see over there. And then now it started to track the camera. With the tracking, you can also change the speed, so I can have it set to slow, standard, or fast. I like to keep it on fast because it actually like keeps up with you then, but if you want it to be a little bit slower and lag behind and a little bit smoother, then you could set it to slow or standard. But honestly, fast isn't too fast for the most part. I've found fast tracks really well and it doesn't let you get out of frame, but it doesn't look too jumpy or frantic or anything like that. So I've been keeping it on fast all the time that I've been using this. And now if I wanted to get a wide shot, then I can set it to wide and it'll track sort of as wide as it can go, and it's just all the way zoomed out. But then if I wanted a close-up, I can click the close-up button and then it'll zoom in to track sort of that however close it deems is a close-up. And the tracking not only works for the gimbal, but it also works for the autofocus. So obviously it's gonna have autofocus if it's gonna have tracking, especially at an f1.8, you're gonna want there to be autofocus. One of the other things with the tracking is you can adjust the framing. So if I don't want my face in the middle, if I maybe want my face over to one side, what I do is I just drag this line across, and then it'll keep my face on that side of the frame rather than in the middle. And you can also adjust it like up and down as well. So let's say I wanted my face up in the top corner for some reason, I can do that. And then no matter where I am, it's gonna try to keep my face in that part of the frame. Now it's also, of course, got auto exposure tools. Right now it's set to auto, but if I want to switch it to manual mode and change the ISO, I don't know why that was so high. So I can then change my manual settings like that. Right now I set the ISO all the way down to 100, and I put the shutter at 1/200, mainly because I don't have an ND filter on here and it's pretty bright. I've got lights on plus the windows out there. I've got a lot of ND on this camera, so it kind of makes sense that it can't go dark enough. So I have had to crank the shutter a little bit, but if you're in a little bit of a darker room that you have control of, you could set it to 1/50 or 1/60 shutter, depending on the frame rate you're shooting at. And then you can adjust with ISO or even leave it at ISO 100 if you have control over the lights. But honestly, for what it is, auto is generally pretty fine. Like, it just sort of let it do what it needs to do when it comes to exposure. You can obviously also change the white balance, set it to either auto, or you can set it to, you know, any Kelvin number you want. As for IO, it has decent IO for the size that it is, but compared to something like the Tail 2, which is a much bigger, better version, it obviously doesn't have as much. Like, this doesn't have SDI or anything like that, but it does have a 3.5mm mic jack on the side there. It has a micro SD card port. So right now I've got a 128 gig micro SD card in there, which it's recording to, and that'll get several hours of recording in 4K 25 at the highest bitrate. You've then also got a micro HDMI. So if you want to output this directly to a capture card or to a monitor, then you can just go HDMI straight out. You just need a micro HDMI adapter or cable. And then on the back, it's got a USB-C port for anything that you would want to use a USB-C port for, particularly connecting it to a computer to be used either as a webcam or to transfer files if you don't want to take the SD card out and plug it in or anything like that. And then on the bottom here, it has a 1/4-20 thread, which means you can then just screw it onto any tripod. Or something that I actually have done is I put this Arca Swiss plate from PGY Tech on the bottom of it, and then I've got an Arca Swiss receiver on a little stand behind my monitor there. So if I do want to use this as a webcam for Zoom calls or for streaming, I can then just put this up, peeking over the top of my monitor, and then it's really easy to attach and detach. And another thing that I was planning on doing for using it as a BTS camera, but I didn't end up doing, was using one of those same Arca Swiss receivers on here, so this plate can go straight into there on a super clamp. So then I can just clamp this to anything and then use that as a behind the scenes angle. However, because this is so small and there's usually surfaces you can put it on, this was just like put places. You don't really need to clamp it down or screw it onto anything. You can just sort of place it there. The base is decently heavy, so it's never gonna just like tip over. But that was one use case that I was sort of thinking of using and didn't end up doing. But I'm probably gonna keep one of these on all the time when I keep it here behind my desk to use as a webcam, so I don't have to plug in, you know, a full-size camera every time I need to use a webcam. And one of the other things you can do with the remote control from the app is you can set positions. So right now there is a position 1, which is right there. And if I wanted to add a new position, let's say it's, you know, over here at that light, that's my new position. I can add P2 there, and I can switch between P1 and P2. So if you are doing a live stream and you have two different spaces where you want to go, but you don't want it to necessarily track you, you could set it to P1, you click on that, and then you're like, okay, we're going to move over here to P2, click on that, and you can just adjust it to the exact same position every single time. Now, when it comes to the actual control of it through a phone or a computer, you have the mobile app and the desktop app. They both pretty much have all the same controls. You'll have a little bit more on the desktop app, but for the mobile app, for example, you can go through and change, obviously, your actual camera settings, your ISO, your white balance, your all your exposure stuff. You can adjust your audio settings. There's actually a built-in mic on here, so if you need to sync it to something else, I probably wouldn't suggest using the built-in mic as an actual mic. Use a proper mic, but you can adjust those settings. You can even monitor it through the app. And there's also built-in noise reduction on that if you want to use it as well. But of course, you can plug in a 3.5mm mic into the side of the camera there. So then if you wanted to use a wireless mic like I'm using now, or plug in, you know, a little shotgun or something like that. You've got all of your output settings. So you've got all your record settings, of course, with your resolution, your frame rate, and your bit rate. But you can also turn on UVC mode, so you can use it via USB as a webcam. You've got NDI, which I have no use for right now, but if that's something that you would need, you can do NDI. You can also technically stream directly from this if you put in like stream keys and stuff like that. Again, that's not really something that I'm gonna use. I don't use that on any of my devices. I just stream through streaming software on my computer if I do stream. And then you've also got your gesture control settings, which, as I mentioned with the tracking before, you can track stuff, but you can actually turn on and off tracking with hand gestures. So if I hold up my hand, that'll turn off the tracking, and now it's no longer tracking my face. And if I wanted to start again, I can hold up the gesture and then there it is. So you can turn these gestures on and off. We can zoom in if we want by holding that, and it's going to zoom back in, and then I'll do it again to zoom back out. And you can also stop and start recording with a different one. While I'm still recording, I'm not actually going to stop the recording. Within the app, you can also then just view all the recordings that you've made. So if I wanted to either just play it back to see what I got, or download it to my phone, download it to my computer, or anything like that, even share it, you can do all that from within the app. You don't actually have to transfer it anywhere or take the card out. But yeah, that is the OBSBot Tail Air. If you're interested in it, there is a link in the description, which might also give you a bit of a discount as well. Maybe go watch one of my other videos and do all the other things. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.